always an issue with services, I guess. But one wonderful thing that has happened since 2016 is the state has now standardized digital parcel data. So what's really great about that, one of the challenges we had before, we couldn't identify these parcels because we didn't have good maps to do that. You really have to go visit the town offices. Often they didn't have digital maps. It just was a process, right? Now we have digital mapping available for the whole state. So that remainder of 10% of the registrars, whatever, we can do that work pretty easily and complete it. This is just a paper map. I guess I'm just here to, that's the process, and that's what happened. If people have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Well, I have questions about the source data.
Sure.
So as far as process goes, where did your intern get the data from, and how did you check it? It sounded like you checked some of it, but didn't finish.
Well, you know, in GIS in Vermont, we're rich with stuff. I mean, the Vermont Center for Geographic Information, my agency, we collaborate and share data everywhere. So really the parcel data in some of these towns existed. So if you look at the map, you'll see like Sudbury, Benson.
I'm wondering how you identified the quarries. I get the parcel data.
Oh,
how did you identify the quarries themselves?
So when the Slate quarries had to register with Act 250, part of that requirement was information about the parcel, number of boreholes, how many structures were on the site, and they had to include a map. Often, you know, the maps kind of range. You know, they range from cartoon characters. You know, yeah, and then but then also some people do have, you know, at least pictures of the actual parcel from the town office. So using that, it's pretty easy to locate those on the ground.
Okay, so this represents, if there was a paper napkin with a dot on it that said, here's a quarry, this is the whole parcel that quarry.
That's correct.
Okay.
We really just, from a data perspective at this point, all we have is identified the parcel, and then within what we call the attributes of that polygon, it says how many boreholes and how many structures were registered. My hope would be when this is done, which wouldn't be hard, if there's, with additional work, we could probably attach those registered documents to the feature so it could be just very easily accessible for people to look at.
And so when you say 10% remains, how many files does that represent? Or
Probably like 20, 25. I gave Diane an estimate of about 40 hours, you know, just a round number. 5 days to kind of finish the work, you know, and that's including throwing it up in a web map so people can zoom around, check it out. They'd be able to click on the feature, access the documents to kind of get a little more information on what happened when it registered.
Any other questions? Representative McCullough.
So that I better understand, first of all, we did get testimony. There are in the neighborhood of 400 quarries that have been registered. And what I think I see here are 50-ish things that are represented as 90% of the parcels, as I think the chair named it. And so that within the ones that are listed and the other maybe 10% parcels lie some of the active, which varies, I understand, by testimony. The active last 2 years ago, but not right now because we don't need any green slate. And all the reserves. All of those lie within these orange squares, including the next 10% that you're going to map. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would reduce the number of registered quarries. I think the district office, if my memory serves me, I think the number was right around 115 quarries were registered. That's the number I have. Maybe Craig can provide some insight on that.
Yeah, I think from what I recall, and I haven't frankly looked at these numbers in maybe about a year as well, but from what I remember, there might have been about 100 parcels with multiple quarry holes on each of the parcels. So it
Yes.
might have been 100 parcels and
Parcels.
300 to 400 quarries.
Yep.
If, I think that's approximately
Yep,
that
yep,
number.
yep. Thank you.
The work that the additional work that has to happen, and maybe what was completed before, we didn't try to identify the boreholes. I mean, that's just not possible sitting at a desk. It's just not.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, great. Any other questions?
Looks good. Yeah. Thanks for doing the work.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. All right. I'm not sure who wants to go first, Mr. Smith or Matt?
Sure. Let's,
Or together.
should we go together?
That's great, sure, together would be
Okay.
great.
Slide over. For the record, Chris Smith, New England Slate. Thank you very much.
And Craig Markrow from Vermont Structural Slate. We appreciate the chance to appear before your committee again. This will be our third time, I believe.
We want you to get all the seasons in the Ethan.
Yes. This is actually a presentation that I gave last year. So I won't go through that unless we need to touch upon parts of it. But we were called and asked to come up last week, and we said, look, we really don't have anything new to add. Nothing's really changed from our perspective. But we're happy to come up, and if anybody had questions for us or needed clarification on something we did last year, we're happy to. I think the last time we were here, the committee asked us if we would be willing to go to participate in a study session, which we said yes, sure, and that didn't happen. So we remain open to that and willing to participate in such a session. The other thing I would just comment on what Annette Smith said. She referenced a federal statute that requires certain blasting procedures within a half mile, pre-blast surveys and all that. And we heard that come up once before several months ago, and we checked it out, and according to our counsel, that does not apply to surface, to slate quarrying. It's specifically for certain types of coal mining. So we don't believe that in any way applies to us. I'll just summarize and say there's slate quarry basically in two parts of the country. In Virginia, and there's 2 companies, and in Vermont there's about 20 companies. None of them are big companies. We've been doing it for a couple hundred years. I believe that if you look at the parcels that we just saw, it represents less than 0.2% of the state of Vermont, and it's not going to suddenly expand out of that. The slate is where it is, and it's a big part of life in our little part of Vermont. And we figure we employ directly about 300 people, and then there's all the ancillary jobs as well. We don't believe that we were exempted from Act 250 20 years ago, because I mean I've had to go through Act 250 since then with registered quarries, and I guess maybe there's some legal arguments that I don't understand, but all I know is I've had to go through it with a registered quarry, so I don't really see where we're exempt. We're regulated by, I've got a list here, probably 20 different federal and state regulations. We said last year, we're big proponents of the map. I think what Ryan's done is fantastic. I think the problem with the neighbors that came up in the last few years stems from either real estate agents or prospective buyers just didn't know about the quarries. And I think we felt like we had submitted these registrations 20 years ago, and they should have known about it. And so it's unfortunate, but I think if we do this map and complete it, it protects everybody, even you all sitting around this table in a way, because everybody has perfect information that way. The last thing I'd say is that yes, there's been I know of 3 neighbors who have expressed their unhappiness with Slate operations in the last few years, but I would say there's also at least, I would guess, 1,000 that aren't unhappy. I mean, if you take all the Slate quarries and all the abutting landowners, I mean, I don't think this is a widespread problem. I mean, I know when we went through Act 250 at our River Street quarry in Fairhaven, there was over 30 abutting landowners. Not one of them complained or filed anything, or it went through. And so we're family companies. We're all invested up to our eyeballs. We just pretty much want to be able to continue to work hard and make an impact in our little area of Vermont.
Yeah, just to add on very briefly to what Craig said, I think the work that Mr. Knox has done is fantastic, and the communication with the real estate community, with neighbors, with the towns, and the possible use in zoning and planning would be fantastic. I think we all can agree that more communication between all the parties would be helpful, and having that map completed would be a great first step. And carrying on that thought of a local study committee or some sort of a local solution is very much possible, and despite what other people have said here today, the Slate industry is very willing to discuss with anyone any of these issues. So I think we value the local community. We're all members of select boards and school boards and doing things in our own communities where we live and work. And I think having that local input and local collaboration would be very important. So for whatever the reasons were that the study committee didn't happen at the end of last year, we would still hope that before any action was taken, that there'd be a chance for the local communities to weigh in, for the local neighbors, for the local industry to have a say in how this is all going to play out. It is a small industry, as the map points out. There's only a handful of parcels out there. It's not going to grow. We can't just go open up a new Slate quarry and a new parcel of forest land or farmland. That the held and reserve provision that we value and need for our businesses is limited to those parcels on that map. So it's not growing or spreading or going to pop up anywhere else. It's very isolated to these. So if we can come up with a way to manage that existing resource base that still protects the neighbors but still lets us continue our businesses, I mean, I think that's very, very attainable, and we hope we have a chance to do that before something is just kind of handed down or pushed through rapidly. So we really appreciate being included in this conversation, having an invite to come up here today and speak before you, and we're certainly open and available to continue the conversation.
One other thing, since last year when we were here, we've formed the Green Mountain Slate Quarry Association, and because of some of the issues that have plagued us the last couple of years, we are sure in our bylaws we spent a lot of time putting in procedures to expel any Slate company that isn't acting in a good way. So, because that was one of the things we heard from the town zoning in one case, is that you need to police yourself. So we've tried to come up with a mechanism to not let in a company that is maybe not acting well, or one that's already in does something we don't like. So it's something we can do. It's hard for us to really take action against other companies, but we're trying to put our best foot forward with this new association.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that, I guess Annette just mentioned, that she felt like there was within the Slate Quarry owners, maybe lack of agreement on that. So the group had conversations about, had lack of agreement on how to move forward, or that there were issues, or,
Well, there's, our industry is, let's say there's maybe 20 companies, and a number of us, I think, are like-minded, and there are some that aren't, and it's hard for us to, to influence the way everybody thinks.
But to say we can't come to a solution because not everyone agrees, I think is misleading. Of course, there's going to be disagreement among 20 small business owners, and not everyone's going to have the exact same vision, but to say that we can't have a conversation or can't work to find a solution because there's disagreement, I don't know if I buy that. So I don't think that's a reason to stop the process.
so what process?
Well, I think Annette mentioned that she was worried that civil war was going to break out or something calamitous among the Slate Quarry members, because there wasn't agreement in a stakeholder or type process. So I'm just saying that I don't, if a process like that were to evolve or were to be initiated, I think there would be room for
Well, who would you see facilitating that? I mean, that could happen at the local level. Could your
Well, we had
association do it?
we had a pretty in-depth study period back in the mid-90s, and that was, I think, Representative McCormick, right? He came down,
Yeah.
and I think he sort of led the charge on it, and he came down 2 or 3 times, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Ryan, can I ask you one more question since you're sitting here? What's the opportunity to use this even in incomplete form? Like, would this go on the A&R Atlas if it were finished and vetted and?
Yeah, I mean, it could be put up there in its current state as well.
And it could be advisory or something?
Yeah, just draft, not complete.
Okay. Because that seems like 90% is pretty
Yeah.
darn good.
I agree.
So, okay.
I think the problems came up because people bought land and didn't know what they were buying, and at least in 2 cases. In 1 case, I think the person knew what they were doing because they did it a long time ago.
Did you want to speak?
John Hill, Greenstone Slate. I had a question. Last spring we sat through a meeting with Annette, and we was talking only about 1 parcel and 1 family. And Craig and Chris and I and my father were there, and we participated, and we weren't in a position to fully understand what's happening. So it's kind of informative. But we left there and thinking, this is just a stepping stone. And Annette comes here today and makes it sound like, we want nothing to do with it. And I kind of take, I take a position of seeing my name put on the screen by Annette 5 years ago, which was incorrect. And today's meeting, she was incorrect again. But unfortunately, you don't know that because you weren't there with us, and so it's like our side versus her side. So I'm just trying to find out, if you cannot trust, I'm going to be accurate, you have to understand that you cannot trust what is said by the opposition all the time because they have they take a certain stance. Annette was doing her job of helping out the family, but that's not what happened. It was her testimony was not exactly true. It wasn't false, but it wasn't really true. And I kind of take a position of, if it's not true, don't say it. Thank you.
Questions, committee? Representative Lefebvre and then McCullough.
Where do you fellows think you're at now? You say you're willing to go forward if the opportunity presented itself, and more or less talking with the neighbors in the town to try to what are you after? What would that amount to? An understanding or some sort of pact with the town in terms of how these things are zoned or how they're regulated?
I think the bottom line would be we'd like some certainty going forward so we can continue to invest in our businesses and operate our businesses and have some sort of vision for the future. I think that'd be the ultimate goal.
I think we should work together with Ryan's group on getting the map as accurate as possible, because I think that was what caused all the problems, was just people didn't know. So, I mean, I think if we'd had this map 5 years ago, we really wouldn't have had any of these problems.
And that might be a good spot to start, is after the map's completed, to find ways to use it effectively in the communities to alleviate some of these issues. And that might be a really great first step.
Yep, I agree. Representative McCullough.
First of all, just a comment that would go to the administration, Ryan is making a map, and it sounds like we're moving toward an area where the map would be part of the A&R Atlas, and I'm beating a stump about the administration not wanting it used for regulation. So therein is a problem that would need to be resolved, specifically about this map, if not others. Craig, I'm understanding that you believe that from the beginning, the quarries were regulated by Act 250. Did I get that correct? I said, I quoted, "We believe we are regulated by Act 250.
Yes, because I had to go through Act 250
Yep.
with a
And-
registered quarry.
Okay, and then for me, with all the discomfort of the people and businesses in the area and the businesses of the quarries as well, I feel that the certainty that you're looking for is to be found in Act 250, that you believe you're already covered by, and the same regulations that every other quarry in the state of Vermont has to operate under. So, I mean, I understand that this is different than a sand extraction, and it's different than a gravel extraction. But that being said, there are a lot of similarities as well, and so I guess I would hope that the certainty would come within the regulations, and you can craft your businesses within those regulations instead of having the uncertainty.
Well, the gravel pits and aggregates can pop up anywhere in the state, and they tend to be controlled by big publicly traded companies, not family companies for the most part. I think, there's a lot of differences between what we do and, Pike Industries or somebody like that. And I guess I respectfully disagree with you, because I don't see where, I mean, even if you quarries under Act 250 jurisdiction, still blasting, there's still trucks, they still exist. She said she had heard of blasting at 2 a.m. Not that I know of. I mean, we never blast after 3:30.
I think the certainty that we had after the 1990s registration of existing quarry holes was that those mineral resources could be held in reserve, and that's really, I think, the big issue that we see as threatening, is losing that ability to go into quarries that have been held in reserve. And that they were pre-existing, they have been operated at some point in the past, they're an owned asset that these companies and families are counting on as a financial resource. So having that, I believe the draft bill that was presented last session was repealing that language that allowed those quarries to be held in reserve. And I think that's the biggest concern for a lot of the quarry owners and operators, is that these mineral resources that they've held may be taken away. And I think certainly if you make it through the Act 250 process, there could be some certainty. I think there's a perception by a lot of people that the Act 250 process can be burdensome and time consuming, be drug out by process. And we've seen that some local trails trying to be built in our community that's gone on for over a year with all kinds of consultants and maps and wetlands permits. And it's not so much that anyone's going to say, no, you can't do your project. It's that it takes so long that it's a kind of a death by 1,000 cuts. And a lot of these small family businesses don't have the resources to go through a 12 or 18 month or 2 year process, even though no one's saying you can't do it. It's just such a tough process. So that's, at least in my mind, maybe I'm just speaking personally here, but I think that's some of the uncertainty that is threatening to us.
Thank you.
All right, final questions? Thank you for coming.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Can anyone think? How's everyone doing? Certainly open to hearing perspectives from those of you with thoughts to share on the afternoon's testimony. You will have time probably tomorrow after the floor to talk about issues that have come before us. It'll be both like next steps and how we want to, what our next steps are for Act 250 really. So that's your homework assignment for tonight, to think about that. If you're like me, you'll think about it in the morning. But not for too long, because we're going to also hear, take up cannabis again, just to keep your brains flexible. But it looks like Representative McCullough may have a thought.
Whoa.
Original.
The thought is actually a lot more corporal. There, until we got this second window open, I was suffering mightily.
Yeah.
And
We can turn the, it also may be that the heat was up too high.
well, it had to do with oxygen, eyes stinging again, and,
Yeah,
and
okay.
getting heavy.
Yep, I had that, that was
So I'm
flushed.
wondering if we can get that fire door
Oh,
prohibition,
lifted.
get the alarm snipped so that we, or by request, shut down individually. I know our fire system at home, there are distinct regions, and when we know we're gonna have a big crowd, as Sergeant at Arms, I have no idea, but it's just the thought where we could suddenly get an infusion of oxygen.
We had,
I can bypass it for you.
we have,
It's simple.
A jumper wire.
That's right.
we do have one window not open, so we could have probably done that sooner,
Yeah.
and we can turn the heat down also
Yeah.
sooner. It was quite a crowd, and we may have exceeded our 40-person capacity from last week. I didn't count this week. You counted?
Yeah.
45.
Counting it out there, I think it was 50. What about the possibility of just having a small fan that we could just put there that would help
We could
move some
probably
air?
handle that. Yep.
Yeah.
I thought once the window there even opened, it just, I thought it moved.
Feel free to speak up, because we
I
didn't
thought-
have as
oh,
many people, so, no, I mean, like, we could have opened this window. This fourth window was never open.
Oh, I thought the window, once that window opened.
Two windows.
Two, it became great. But I like staying here, because once we go to the
Yeah.
other place, I can't focus as well.
Yeah, that's why I
Like,
decided
it's
to
too-
keep
it's
us
too
here.
all
And
over
thank you,
the
Mark, for checking on the other room, but it felt like people were settled and we were started and we're finding our place here, so. It's hard, I was, yeah. Okay.
What were you just saying, Jim? Oh, thank you.
Final thoughts or on substance for today, or we're gonna hold till tomorrow? Comments? Reflections?
Yeah, a comment, in addition to the corporal one. It's disappointing that the NRB for whatever financial reasons or not, let me say, blew off our letter of request. The Slaters appear to have wanted that to happen. We wanted it to happen. And so we've got a map that identifies maybe 50 sites which contain who knows how many in reserve holes, which we're told they can't even like touch. And so for me, you know, I don't want to commit at this moment to action about what we do with the Slater's question in our bill, but I'm really leaning toward the recommendations from the commission, and that we at least make a statement that matches Craig Marcon's Act 250 does regulate slate quarries. I mean, that he said that once in April, he said it twice today, the second time by my specific request. And if Act 250 does regulate it, then by God, they ought to start regulating it. and they ought to start acting as if it did. But I'm not there yet, but that's kind of where my head is heading, and I think the chairs, let's think about all this stuff tonight, and not be reactionary, Tim.
Okay, go, Carol?
I should just leave them.
Okay. All right, well, thank you all. We're adjourned.